Hi all and welcome to Webinar 4, which is a 3-session exclusive with John Bartlett from the NBA, John Mosley Jr. from Netflix's Last Chance U, and this session you are watching now with Phil Hayward. Phil is a high-performance guru who is an expert in his field, having previously worked with Wolverhampton Wolves as head of medical for 10 years before moving to the LA Galaxy to be the Director of Performance and Sports Science. Today's session will be presented by Harriet Brown, the Australian team captain and surf Ironwoman legend, who is also an exercise physiologist and co-founder of the Gold Coast Elite Sports Conference. Before I hand it over to Harriet, I would like to quickly thank our event partners. Firstly, a massive thank you to our major event partner, the City of Gold Coast. For those tuning in around the globe, we can't wait until we're able to have you join us here on the coast in the future. We would like to thank the following event partners for their ongoing support of the Gold Coast Elite Sports Conference, including Gold Coast Super Clinic Physiotherapy, Coomera Anglican College, Oztech Connect, PlayerPath, PainPod, Lynn Hughes Property, Sparms, Pummel, and RDK Sports International. Without further ado, over to you, Harriet.
Welcome, Phil. We are so excited to have you on to chat with us today. So, Phil, to begin with, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you grew up and your pathway into your profession?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to speak to you guys today. So in terms of my background, so I'm a physiotherapist. I graduated as a physiotherapist in 2005 from Manchester School of Physiotherapy. And in terms of my career path from there, I took a fairly, what would be seen as a fairly common career path for UK students, which is to go into the hospital system here in England, so work in the national health system for a couple of years there. And what happens there is that you tend to spend sort of 3 or 4 months in lots of different specialties. So you might be in orthopedics for a few months, or neurology with stroke patients, or respiratory care with people who are maybe on ventilators, those kinds of things. And one of those kind of rotations is musculoskeletal outpatients and sports injuries, which is where I always saw myself going anyway. I always sort of planned to get into physiotherapy with the end goal of working ideally in sport, but certainly with MSK injuries. So alongside my work in the NHS at that time, I was lucky to get some work as well with the local rugby team. But I'd done one of my university placements with Bradford Bulls, who were a massive rugby league team at the time. And in fact, I think they won the World Club Championship the year that I was on placement there. And so I already had sort of a bit of a kind of background experience in rugby, which then allowed me to get this role with a part-time team. So whilst working with a part-time team, I then managed to get some more part-time work with Bolton Wanderers in the league at the time. So my week was very full. I used to work full-time in the NHS, and then every evening was either rugby or football, and then the weekends would be one football match or rugby game. So I didn't see my now wife, girlfriend at the time very, very much. But I think to get your sort of foothold in physiotherapy, certainly in this country, but I guess it's the same there, you have got to sort of go above and beyond and really try and put yourself out there and get lots of different experiences as early as you can do, to really try and demonstrate a willingness to really work hard to get to where you want to get to, but also to get that broad range of experience, which gives you something to refer back to as you go through your career, but also gives you an idea of which direction you might want to head in. So after those part-time roles for sort of 3 or 4 years, I eventually got a full-time role working with the academy at Wolverhampton Wanderers, who at that time were in the Championship, which is the second tier of professional football here, and worked with them for 3 years with the academy. And then there was a position with the first team. At that time, we were then in the Premier League, so I was fortunate to be promoted internally to work with the first team, and took a first team physio role for a couple of years. And then the head of medical services departed in about 2012. He now works with the FA with the England national team. And then I took his role and was head of medical services there for 8 years, up until December 2019, at which point I had the opportunity to go and work in the US and take a role as director of performance and sports science with LA Galaxy, which was just an unbelievable opportunity for me, really, both from a sort of professional standpoint in terms of sort of taking that next step in my career from being a head of the medical director to actually overseeing the whole performance program at a club, but also from a family perspective, the opportunity to go and live in LA is quite different in LA from sort of central England where we live at the moment, and we just thought it was a great opportunity to go across there. So obviously that was a difficult year because that started last January, and then we had the pandemic hit sort of probably March, April time, which really derailed the season. We had about probably 4 months where the league was completely closed down. And then when we did start training again, we did 4 weeks of training, then went into a bubble environment in Orlando, similar to the NBA. We had a 5-week bubble in Orlando in the Disney World Resort. And then the rest of the season was very intense. We had 2 games a week for 10 weeks to finish the season off, and finished in November. And then in the off season, there was a big managerial reshuffle there. The head coach lost his job, and they brought a new head coach in. As part of that change around, the new head coach wanted to bring in a large group of staff with him from his previous club. And one of those members of staff was in a similar role to my role, and we looked at trying to find ways forward and trying to sort of accommodate both positions, but we just really couldn't find any common ground there and a way forward. So on that basis, we just decided that actually the best thing for both parties was probably to sort of separate. So it was all very amicable, but we decided that the best thing was to sort of go our separate ways. So yeah, probably April time this year, which is when the sort of season was starting to kick off there in the MLS. I unfortunately made the trip back across here, and that's kind of where we are at the moment, really.
Here you are now. Well, that was a really great insight into your progression from finishing university to where you are now. And I think there's probably a lot of physios listening in that it's, I guess, nice to hear that everyone has to work really hard, especially in the early stages, juggling multiple jobs to get to where you are. You mentioned that like when you're in season, it's quite busy, quite full on. What does a season day to day, week to week at a professional football franchise look like in most cases?
Yeah, well, I think that differs according to where you are. So, for example, if I take my 2 biggest experiences, both here in England with the Premier League team and in the MLS, we sort of think about the Premier League first of all. That can be different within the league, because at the top end, sort of the top 4 or 5 teams will also be in European competition as well. So they'll quite often have a midweek match against a team in Europe, either in the Champions League or what's now called the Europa League, which is kind of the second level of European competition. So those teams are generally having 2 games a week, which obviously changes the training program quite a lot, and also adds a lot of extra travel in there. The teams in the sort of middle part of the Premier League or the bottom end will often just be in the domestic competitions, which will be the Premier League and then the cup competitions. But because they're so focused on staying in the Premier League, the majority of those sides will tend to play a weakened team in the cup competitions and either get knocked out early, generally is what happens, or they'll just keep two very separate groups of teams for each competition, which means that the sort of the core group who are playing in the Premier League tend to just have 1 game a week, which changes the training program quite a lot. So I'd say the MLS is more similar to that second scenario, where you tend to just have 1 game a week. So to sort of answer the kind of original question, I think in the 2 different scenarios, we tend to structure training around those matches, obviously. So if it's 1 game a week, and this differs from head coach to head coach and what their philosophy is as well, and that does differ according to their background, whether they're sort of a more European continental head coach, or in the US I saw some South American influences as well, or an English head coach with sort of more traditional English football ideas, which has a different kind of philosophy. So in general, the game will be on a Saturday. And then quite often teams will either, I think more generally for the guys who've got more sort of European influences, they'll tend to get the guys in on a Sunday for a recovery session, and that can generally be in at the training ground. If the facilities are good at the training grounds, and most in the Premier League are, they'll have kind of maybe hydrotherapy or some kind of pool that they can use for the recovery session. They'll do some light cardio work on a spin bike, for example, some flexibility work, have access to the masseurs, those kinds of things, and then using other modalities to try and help aid recovery. So that Sunday tends to be quite a short day for the guys who've played. The guys who perhaps weren't in the group on the Saturday will then have an intensive training session on the Sunday morning to try and increase their loads relative to the guys who played on the Saturday, to try and make sure that you don't have this big drop off where the guys who play get a really high load at the weekend and the guys who aren't in the group end up sort of deconditioning because they're not getting the same stimulus. Monday will quite often be a fairly light day still for the guys who played on a Saturday. So quite often here now you hear this term second day recovery, where the guys literally stay off the feet for both days, Sunday and Monday. And I think in my view that's perhaps a little bit overkill and unnecessary. I do really feel that is arguably a waste of time. I feel like if you've only got one game a week, so Saturday to Saturday, there's no real reason why you can't get the guys doing something active on a Monday or out on the grass with the coaching staff and really working on some technical and tactical ideas. It doesn't have to be a really intensive session where they're risking injury by doing lots of high speed running, but I think there's no reason why you can't do a really controlled session with the ball to actually get some more tactical input on that second day, rather than just staying off the feet, which some clubs prefer to do. They'd rather just stay in the gym all day on a Monday as well as a Sunday, and I do feel like you lose a training day there. Tuesday tends to be the most intensive day of the week, where you'll get a lot of high volume, and quite often teams will try and put a gym session into that day, to whether that's in the afternoon as a second session or becomes part of that morning training session at the back end of the morning. And then depending on the coach's idea, Wednesday may be a day off. I think more traditionally in English sort of soccer philosophy, the coaches have quite often given players a Wednesday off in the middle of the week. The more continental coaches will tend to have the guys in for a single session on a Wednesday, which is very much field based. And then Thursday, starting to then think about the game at the weekend, so probably more tactical work on a Thursday with lower intensity. And then Friday's a very easy day, lots of tactical work, working on specific set plays, those kinds of things in preparation for the game on Saturday, which you may have travelled to. Maybe on the Friday afternoon, as well as the training on the Friday morning, you're having to travel to another city or another country in some cases to prepare for the game on the Saturday. I think if you were to ask me what I feel my ideal approach to a weekly training program would be in a one game week, I would suggest that I'd get the guys in for recovery on a Sunday perhaps, or give them the day off and give them the advice of what they should be doing for the recovery at home if you trust them, because I think a lot of that Sunday session, the thought behind that quite often is to get the guys in to make sure they can't be misbehaving on a Saturday night. If you know they're in with you on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m, they can't be in the nightclub till 3 a.m. on the Saturday. But hopefully I think we're starting to get away from that in the professional game generally. And then, so maybe Sunday recovery, Monday have this lighter day, tactical day, but still without too much high speed running to decrease the risk. Tuesday would be a hard day, but then I would go hard again on Wednesday, because I feel like if you give Wednesday off, you lose an opportunity to get a real hard training day in there, because if you train too hard on a Thursday, you'll tend to find that the players then carry that into the game on the Saturday and maybe feel fatigued on the Saturday. But I do feel that if you train hard on a Wednesday, you've then got enough recovery time before the Saturday, so you can actually improve fitness levels and some really sort of high-end decision-making work in fatigue states on the Wednesday session, without risking the performance on the Saturday. So I think working hard Wednesday works well, and then perhaps give the guys Thursday off, complete recovery on a Thursday, and then just have the 1 day lead into the game. But some coaches prefer to have that 2 day lead and just feel like they need that 2 days before to prepare for the game. So I think it's different for everyone, but that's kind of how I would set out an ideal training week. It's quite a long answer to your question there.
And that's really nice to hear, because a lot of sports in Australia will play, every week or once on the weekend. So you can kind of take a lot from that and be able to, I guess, replicate it a little bit. But I think it's pretty common to have that Wednesday off. So it's interesting looking into the load earlier into the week and then recovering a little bit later. Do you have many considerations for individual athlete programs? So loads, given some of the variables with age, position, injury history, that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. And that's something we had a lot of success with in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, especially at Wolves and then more latterly at Galaxy, really trying to prescribe the training according to the actual demands of that player's position. So I think historically, training has just been training for the whole group, and you kind of get what you get as part of that group session without any real focus on individual differences within that. So I think first of all, for me, the positional thing is the most important thing, and making sure that the load is specific to what the demands of the games are on that particular individual because of their position. So the way I would prescribe that is to have the guys wear GPS in matches as well, and that's been frowned upon a little bit, certainly by players up until recently. They just don't like wearing GPS devices on a match day. They feel like, it's a match day, why should I be sort of being monitored so closely on a match day? Because the match is going to, the load during the match are going to be dictated by the pattern of play, what the opposition are like, lots of different variables on a match day. And they don't like to be feeling as though they've got that.
Because they don't want to be monitored, or they physically don't like the feeling of...
I personally think that it's the feeling of the actual vest and the strap. A lot of them don't like that feeling around the chest.
Yeah.
But secondly, I do think it's more of a mindset thing, and I think they think match day is preparing in a different way. I put my match kit on and I'm ready to go. And if they start putting GPS stuff on, they feel like it maybe takes away from that and has more of a sort of training. It reminds them of training more so, and I think that maybe has a psychological impact.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's really.
But I personally think that it's really important, and it's not so much in terms of looking at how you can affect that particular match day by what you find from the GPS outputs, because we do have access to real-time monitoring, but we'd never really make a decision in game based on the GPS, unless perhaps a guy's coming back from injury and you say, well, actually, the guy's had a hamstring injury and you don't want him to exceed a certain amount of sprints or high-speed running distance, HML load, for example, and you might think, actually, well, rather than saying to the coach he can play for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, let's say, well, we're going to allow him to play until he reaches these set targets according to the GPS, and then when he gets to that point, if that happens at 30 minutes, we'll tell the coach actually he's had enough now. Or it might be that because of the flow of the game, it takes 55 minutes, and I think being able to sort of monitor things in that way using GPS is much better than just using a sort of time limit for somebody who's coming back from an injury. But in terms of getting the training loads right, the reason that I think GPS is important in match days is it then allows you to see what the exact demands of that particular player are, and then be able to tailor your training in the week because of that. So what I do in my groups are look at each position and each individual within the position, because some players play positions quite differently. So for example, at Wolves, we had two central midfielders who played in very different ways. One did a lot of high speed running, the other one was more of a holding role and didn't do so much high speed running, but maybe more directional change. And then when you know what the match demands are for that position, you can then work back from that and decide what he needs on each given day of the week, and actually what his total weekly volume should look like. And then that allows you to have a real comprehensive framework of what a weekly training volume should look like for each position. And if a player perhaps isn't in the team and is falling below what you'd expect that positional demand to be on a normal training week with matches, you can make sure that when you're doing any sort of additional work with him to top him up to the levels of the rest of the group, like I mentioned before about the Sunday session being really important because it gets those training loads more equal with the guys who have played in the matches. It allows you to sort of really get a clear idea on what you need to be doing to sort of increase those loads relative to the rest of the group if somebody's not in the team. So yeah, I think training load is really important, specific to position. And then I also think that you do have to respect different profiles of player within that. So somebody's maybe got a really extensive injury history, maybe somebody's had an ACL injury, recently. When I say recent, I mean in the last sort of 3 to 4 years. He's back playing every single week, but you know that if his loads aren't really carefully monitored and perhaps adapted at times, he might react to that, and his knee may be an issue for him. You might look at doing things in a slightly different way for him, and perhaps some of the metabolic demands that you might have got from the rest of the group through training, you might say, actually, let's maybe not work him so hard on a Thursday or a Wednesday. Let's get him in the gym. He can do a hard session on a watt bike or a rowing machine to actually give him that sort of cardiovascular stimulus, but off his feet. That can be a useful tool. And I think likewise with perhaps older players who may be getting towards the end of the career, maybe they don't need to be outside on the grass from a tactical perspective every single day because they know the position, they know the demands of that position within the team. So actually, perhaps when the coach is doing some particular work on a given day, you might say, well, you go back inside now, let's get you off your feet, and you can do some work in the pool or in the gym on a bike or whatever it is to try and just minimize that amount of contact on the grass, I guess.
So there's definitely, sounds like there's a lot that goes into it and very planned and considered and individualized. And just a stat here, in 2018, your department was recognised as the medical team of the year by Football Medical Association in the English Championships. And additionally, you led the team to an all-time record for squad availability of 98.5% during the 2018-19 season, which is super impressive. And I think that would be every team's goal. So I would assume that everyone would like to know a little bit more in depth in how you've done things differently to be able to get to this point.
Yeah. So on the back of those kind of those results that we had there, a lot of people do ask me that, how did you manage to do that, and what's the sort of secret to the success there? And the answer I always give is there is no secret, and there is sort of no one thing. There's no sort of there's no one magic bullet which gets those kind of results. I think it's a combination of probably 7 or 8 different factors, and I think 3 or 4 key ones. So for me, the key things there are training load prescription. So as we just spoke about there, make sure that's very precise for each individual within the group. And then in doing things in that way, you can make sure that the acute chronic ratios for each player's position are kept very consistent throughout the season, and that only comes by having a really good relationship with the coaching staff as well. I think it's all very well, saying as sports scientists and physios, at least what load should be is how it's going to give us the best chance of keeping the guy fit. But if the coach doesn't agree with that philosophy, and the coach, regardless of what you say to him, does what he wants anyway on a Sunday because they've lost on a Saturday, and he thinks the best thing to do is just get them running because they need to be punished, then you're never going to have success. So I think the important thing is actually having that background philosophy and idea in terms of how you'd like things to be done, and then actually selling that idea to the coach and stuff. And sometimes that's a case of pushing an open door because they already have experience of working in this way anyway. But in other cases, it might be that you've got to really work to educate the staff into your way of thinking, and that needs to be done very sensitively, because I think sometimes coaches can just completely shut off as soon as you start talking to them about training load or AC ratios or anything that sounds slightly technical. They just don't want to know about it and think that's not my area. So you've got to be quite sensitive in terms of how you deliver that information, how you kind of sell the ways of working to them, and that needs to be done gradually over a period of time. So I think, training load is the key thing, which has to be done in conjunction with the coaching staff. I think strength and conditioning is another really important thing. If I look at the Premier League, there's certain managers here who are just dead against any S&C work, and actually the stories of Jose Mourinho coming into a club and saying, look, we don't do S&C, we do our work on the grass, we don't need the gym. Gym's for injured players, fit guys, you don't need to go in the gym. And I think that's also an understanding, and it's a communication issue there. And I think someone like him is probably a bit difficult. I hope he's not watching, but difficult to educate because he's done things for so long in a certain way. You're probably not going to change him. But I think that there are ways of explaining to coaching staff why certain things can be really helpful, not just in terms of injury prevention, but in terms of performance as well. So try and take it from a performance angle and say to the coach, okay, we're doing these particular exercises today. The reason for this is that it's going to allow our centre back to be able to jump higher than the centre forward and get in front of him to win a header, for example. It's going to allow our centre forward to be able to explode more quickly and hold off a defender to get away from to score a goal for you, and trying to sort of contextualise it in the paradigm of actual match play to allow them to sort of see the benefits and buy into it with you. So I think strength and conditioning massively important, and it needs to be done in the right way, and I think I've seen it done in the wrong way an awful lot as well, and I feel that can actually be detrimental in many ways. You see a lot of clubs who've got fairly old school or more traditional approach to strength and conditioning from their fitness and conditioning staff who perhaps been there a long time and want to do lots of heavy Olympic lifting with players and not really thinking about why we're doing what we're doing. So going back to a question earlier about the positional demands and making sure training's really tailored to each position, it's the same in the S&C as well. So I don't think that a program of strength and conditioning should be the same for every position, because each different position has very different physical demands. And if you're trying to get them all to do a really heavy squat, for example, a lot of them just don't have very good technique anyway. So you're trying to get them to lift weight, which is inappropriate in terms of their biomechanics and their ability to actually to shift that load in a safe and effective way. And then you get stuck in this position of, well, actually, do I try and teach these guys better technique, or is there another way to get the same stimulus, which doesn't need me to really train them? Because they're not going to engage it. If they're 25 years old or older and haven't got good technique, it's going to be quite hard to get them into a good way of lifting at that age unless they're really committed to learning, and a lot of them wouldn't be. Which is why I think the way that I've been working in the last 4 or 5 years has been very effective, which is using lots of flywheels and pulleys and iso-inertial equipment to make things very functional to the position. So you can do a lot of work in different directions, multi-plane, and actually getting the guys to shift the load and have the resistance in the direction that they will be quite often moving or needing to position themselves during training and matches. And I think as soon as they see that carry over to a game, they automatically buy in more to it as well. I think a guy who's being told that actually he's going to work away from a play on a wall to then hold a virtual defender off and then jockey back to the wall, sees the relevance of that rather than saying to him, okay, you're now going to just try and lift 3 sets of 10 of 100 kilograms on your back. So it's like, well, how is that actually really helping me to become a better soccer player? So I think S&C is really important.
Functional approach, more specific to what they're actually doing on the field. And is that quite different? And that's quite new?
I'd say it's becoming more widespread and more commonplace, and I think that is the kind of Southern European influence, especially in the Premier League. There's a lot of Spanish and Portuguese coaching staff who are coming in to the Premier League, have done for the last 10 or 15 years. And with them, they often have a fitness coach or a strength and conditioning guy who brings some of these philosophies with them. So a lot of the things that I learned were from the Portuguese coaching group who were at Wolves more recently. And I think it's important to be open-minded. I think it's quite easy as a English member of staff in the back room at a Premier League club to sort of be a bit resistant and see these guys coming in wanting to change the way of working and perhaps bring a load of new equipment to work in a different way, and you think this is a fad, it's not going to last. But I think it's important to sort of be open-minded to it, understand why they want to do it, because they must, at the end of the day, they want to be successful. They don't want to come in to change things for the sake of changing things. They think that what they're doing is going to bring success for the coach and group, because they need success, because if they don't, they won't be in a job for very long. So actually embrace it, try and understand it, and try and learn and see which bits you can integrate into your practice. And I think, of the things that we did at Wolves, there's some things that I'd say actually I didn't really think were that effective, and I probably would kind of dismiss, but I'd say sort of 60-70% of the things that we changed because of the new influence of the Portuguese guys, I'd take with me and say actually that's now part of my way of working, my philosophy, and certainly part of the way that I worked over in LA last year.
You talk a lot about communicating with the coach and getting buy-in and making sure that you're all on the same page, especially when there's kind of new methods coming in. At the Wolves, you led a team of 30 full-time medical and sports science professionals across all age groups. How did you make sure that everyone was on the same page? Do you feel like a lot of your role was managing staff, or are you still working with the athletes? Or how did you kind of get this all to work well together?
Yeah, so to answer the sort of last part of the question, that a lot of my work did come away from working with players more recently, probably the last 3 years of my career, certainly a year at Galaxy and 2 years before that at Wolves. I wasn't doing loads of hands-on work with players, maybe some joint consultations, say an injured player comes in and the physio's looking at him, I'll work alongside the physio and just do a bit of a joint assessment, and we'll talk through things together and do some clinical reasoning together, which I think is useful. But I wouldn't necessarily have had time to spend all day with an injured player and sort of see him right the way through his day of rehab as I would have done perhaps a few years earlier, because if I was going to do that, I then wouldn't have time to manage the rest of the staff. And as you said, it was quite an extensive group of staff there. So I think the key thing to getting all the staff put in the same direction is first of all making sure that they are the right staff. So that's a process of evaluation. And for me, I was at Wolves for 12 years, so a lot of the staff that were there and I'd either been part of the recruitment process or I'd certainly seen them come in, and I think all but two had been there less time than me, so I'd sort of got to know them really well along the way. So you get a feel for how they are, and hopefully you get the recruitment right and you've got the right person in the building. On occasions you won't, and there'll be people that come in and you think actually it's probably not the best fit. And I think it's sort of having the confidence to make sure that you do what you need to do to get the right group there. And I wouldn't by any means say, it's as simple as saying, look, he's not the right guy, we've got it wrong, he needs to go. I think you've got to try and see if you can mold him and change him. At the end of the day, you brought that person into there's some things about him that you really saw as being real benefits and real positives for the club and the position. So I think you've got to think, well, actually, we saw something in him then, so why aren't we getting that out of him, and how can we actually work with him in a different way to make sure that we get out of him or her what we thought we were going to get out of them. I think if you go down that path and still can't change them and get them to come into your way of thinking, then you've got to say, well, actually, it's not working out, and we go our separate ways. And that, that happened probably in 8 years, only 3, maybe 4 times at the most. It's not a common occurrence, but I think that's one thing. You've got to make sure that you get the group of staff that you need to have there, and that you've got confidence in their knowledge and skills and their ability to work, and also trusting that they're going to communicate the right messages as well. I think that's key, especially in all sport, but I think especially in soccer, where if you have 2 games a week, you are going to be in 7 days a week. You're under each other's feet the whole time. You're in hotels twice a week, and you're just around each other the whole time. I think any negativity that can sort of creep in there, any sort of sense that a member of staff isn't quite on the same page and is sort of giving the wrong message into the player, that can cause problems. So I think it's important to have that trust that they're going to be saying the right things and sticking to the same messages that you want to get across to the group both from a medical perspective, but also from a coaching perspective. It's no good if the coach is trying to do something tactically and then the physio or a masseur sort of start saying, yeah, I don't agree with the formation you're going to play tomorrow night. You need to make sure that everyone is very, very in tune with what the messaging is. And then I think finally it's how you communicate that. And with a big group of staff, it is hard. I think even more so now with COVID, it's become almost impossible. I know, you guys luckily haven't been quite so badly affected perhaps as we have over here in the States, but it's gone from being able to have big group meetings with 30 people in a conference room to now having to sort of do things like this on Zoom and trying to find different ways of communicating, which has definitely made things more difficult. So I think, it's, the way I would ideally work is to tend to have one big weekly meeting with the whole group of staff, which doesn't need to be a big long thing, but it's a short review meeting, perhaps on a Monday morning with the whole group. Everyone can hear what the plan is for the week, but also give the feedback to the rest of the group about their program. So perhaps the under 23s have got a different schedule than the first team, the under 18s are different. Those program leads can also relay that information to the group, so everyone's on the same page at the start of the week and understands from a staffing perspective and a scheduling and allocation of equipment and facilities, all those kinds of things. Everyone's understanding where they are at the beginning of the week, and we can make sure that any potential difficulties are ironed out at the start. And then I think from there it becomes a job of delegating things to the appropriate people, so that there's no chance that I'd be able to sort of sit down every single week with the under 18 physio, because I just don't really have the time in the week to get across all these people. So it's having the confidence in the staff that are there to make sure that they're line managing their staff in an effective way. And then my communication will tend to be with probably 5 or 6 key program leads from across the club on a regular basis. And then they will sit down every 6 weeks and have their review meeting with their staff. And then we'll then sit together and disseminate the information that they've taken from their group of staff, so that I'm sort of aware of what's going on, but perhaps not having that day-to-day contact with those guys, and then making sure that at least once every quarter you are having that face-to-face contact with everyone. Because I think sometimes perhaps as a younger or less experienced clinician or sports scientist, you don't feel like you're ever getting that time to sort of actually sit down and have that communication with the guy who's running the thing or the girl's running the thing. You can feel a little bit sort of detached from everything. So I think it's important to have that contact, but understanding that it's not going to be possible to do it all the time.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts, that communication is definitely super important. And I know that you've mentioned that quite a few times on your in your questions. How, as you've progressed through, if you've got new ideas or some new research coming out and you'd like to implement that, how do you kind of back yourself and change and shake things up when things have been done for a certain way for such a long time as well?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's a case of making sure that you're confident that that decision is the right one. So really understanding that if it is some new research or some new way of working or using a new piece of equipment, making sure that you really, really understand what benefits that's going to give you, and also potentially what are the negative consequences of what you're going to take away to fit that into the program. So if you've been doing something in a certain way, you think, well, actually, this can now replace what we did there. That might be the right thing for 17 out of your 24 players, but actually what you're going to do about those 7 players who actually really, really value that way of working, for example, if we're talking about maybe a gym activity, for example. So I think it's really weighing up the consequences of the action. And if you think that is definitely the right thing to do, get a really good understanding of how everything works. So, for example, if it's something, let's say it's a piece of equipment. So let's talk about, for example, like a Lord board, for example, 5-6 years ago, that comes in. You think this is going to be a really good way. It's going to revolutionise how we can manage these things and load monitor. Well, if you don't really understand exactly how the equipment's working and what the data is, when you're trying to teach the other staff about that, if they ask a question, you can answer it, and straight away you're going to lose that buy-in. So I think it's really making sure that you've already preemptively ask yourself all those questions to make sure that you're not going to get caught short if you are trying to deliver that information to other staff. I think although no one has all the answers to all the questions, I do think in key times like that, when you're trying to get buy-in, if people lose confidence by not having confidence that you know everything about what you're trying to get them to do, then I think that can really detract from what you're trying to achieve. So I think, really understanding the system or the piece of equipment or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And then lastly, as I said, 10 times before, communicating it effectively to make sure that everyone really is on board with why you want to do it. Doesn't just see it as being a change because it's a new fad. Okay, Arsenal are doing this, we're now going to start doing the same thing. Actually, no, we're going to do it because actually it's going to give us these different outcomes, which we're perhaps lacking. Maybe we feel like whatever the explosiveness of the fullbacks isn't where it should be. So actually this new bit of kit could actually allow us to generate that explosive power more effectively. So we think we're going to do that to actually improve performance, and trying to communicate that to make sure they really understand why you're doing what you're doing, as opposed to just being a step change because it's something that's new and you fancy trying something different.
You've talked a bit about different technologies, equipment, training, load, even recovery. What did you find the biggest differences, across the board, apart from all the different, I guess, playing times or games between the English Premier League and the Major League Soccer?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences. So I'd say the MLS is a really unique league in world sport, really, not just in soccer or football, because there are so many different kind of parameters that the league set, which mean that each team is very, very equal. So, for example, the wage cap is very, very rigid. Within that wage cap, you have 3 players who can earn above the salary cap. They're called your designated players or DPs, and those 3 guys are going to be the ones who are going to make the difference. So, being very, very crude, but every single player is of a certain level. Let's say every player is kind of, they're all right. They're sort of 5 or 6 out of 10. You can get 3 players who are going to be 9 or 10 out of 10 each week. Then you can keep those guys fit. You have a really good chance of winning leagues. So that's what teams do. They can invest with it. So they can invest whatever they want above the salary cap in these 3 players. So the bigger teams can spend more on those real sort of high profile signings to hopefully get themselves to the top end of the league and winning the cup at the end of the year. So the big difference for me working within those parameters, so making sure that those 3 guys are fit is crucial. I've never really had that before, where you end up sort of, you tailor everything anyway according to position and age, like I've spoken about already, but you almost then need to kind of add an extra layer of specificity to those 3 players to make sure that everything is absolutely as it can be for those guys, to give them the best chance of staying fit. And the players just accept that, because I think that they see that those 3 guys are going to be the difference, and they can see the difference in quality anyway in training each day. And the rest of the group just understand, if this guy's getting sent off for different testing, or he's getting a different nutrition plan, or he's getting different work in the gym one-to-one that they're not necessarily getting. I thought at first maybe that would cause friction and affect the team dynamic, but it doesn't. The other players just think actually that's fine, because if he plays well and he plays every single week, we've got a better chance of winning, which is better for me. So they kind of buy into that. Then also travel is very different as well. So different now because of COVID, but in normal times, teams in the MLS are only allowed to take 8 chartered journeys per year. So the rest of the year, they're actually flying commercially with normal people, or the general public, I should say. So that's very interesting as well, because from being in Europe with Wolves, we used to just be able to go to the airport, you'd get on the plane, and when it was ready to go, everyone's on, off you go, you get to destination, the coach can come right alongside the plane, and away you go. Now you're in a situation where you're having to sort of check in the normal check-in desks at the airport, get your bags through, potentially change, and make a connection to change to a different flight, move all the bags across. It's very, very challenging logistically to actually achieve that with a group of
monitored by the MLS?
staff.
Is that all monitored?
Yes,
rules and
yeah, very strictly. So if teams go above that, they'll get a big fine from the league and maybe a points deduction as well. And the idea is that they don't want a big budget team to be able to really just charter everywhere and have that real efficient way of traveling, which give them a performance advantage. Yeah, exactly. They want everyone to be kept at the same level. So then that brings a different layer into your planning, because then you're looking at the fixture list at the start of the season, as well as thinking about what that might do to your training loads and when you might travel in terms of what's best for sleep. You've also got to factor in when you're going to use these chartered flights. So do you actually think, well, we're flying to New York to play there, which is a 4.5-hour flight for a Saturday evening game, and then we don't have a game until the next Saturday. So maybe it's better to fly there chartered on a Friday to make sure they're really well prepared for the game. And then actually that then unfortunately means they're going to stay overnight the night of the game. They can't fly back until the commercial flight leaves at 4 p.m. the next day. Or do you say, well, actually, we'll fly there 2 days early commercially, except it's going to be a bit of a difficult journey across there, but then we'll take 2 days in a hotel to just kind of just sort of acclimatize to New York and get over the travel, but then we'll charter back because we want to make sure we have a really good training week the next week prior to the next game. So there's a lot of different thinking comes into which I'd never had to consider before, because in Europe and in the rest of the sports leagues in the US, and I think probably Australia, it's commonplace for teams just to charter and just travel as a group and without any outside people or any other difficulties with scheduling and stuff. So that was difficult.
Is that all planned at the start of the season, or do you see how the team's playing, how everyone's feeling, and then kind of adapt as you go?
Yeah, no, it tends to be planned sort of 2 months ahead. So you need to make the flight bookings a couple of months in advance, and also hotel bookings as well. So that scenario there where I said like you might end up flying 2 days earlier commercially and then staying over 2 nights before the game. You might then stay over the night of the game. So you might be away from LA for 3 or 4 nights in some cases, because you think actually staying in hotels is better than using up one of our chartered flights for this particular trip. So you've got to get things like hotel bookings organised. It needs to be done well in advance. But it's not all done at the start of the season, because you might see how things play out before deciding when you want to maybe use one of these chartered ships, if you like, and you might imagine let's save one for a really important game, 2 games for the end of the season, because it might be you've got a game on a Saturday 3 hours away and you have a Wednesday night game, and if everything's done and there's nothing to play for, because it might be that because in the MLS there's a playoff system, so you might already be secure in the playoffs, and you know that whatever happens in those 2 games, you're still going to be in the playoffs anyway, so you may as well not worry about using these flights, and I've already used them beforehand. Or you might think actually it's going to be a really important game for us, so let's make sure we get that preparation as good as it can be and charter both ways. So that comes into your thinking as well, sort of seeing how the season's panning out and deciding when to use these charters. That's all different at the moment though, because of COVID. Because now with COVID, they're also wanting to try and keep the bubble secure of each team. Teams are chartering all the time at present, although that might change soon because things are really starting to open up there. So I wouldn't imagine that carry on for the rest of the season. I think in the next few weeks that will perhaps change and go back to this approach where they have to travel commercially on occasion.
There's a lot of high pressure decisions that you have to make in your role, with a lot at stake, really. How do you personally manage the stress and pressure of trying to have your best players, or even the 3 best players, fit and healthy and ready to play all the time?
I think I've become very used to it. I just ever since I started work, really, and it goes right back to my working with the semi-pro rugby club. That was in some ways more pressurized, because those guys, and I don't know how it is in Australia, but certainly in England, in semi-professional rugby league, a lot of these guys are working full-time jobs, but their rugby makes up a big portion of their income. So, for example, it might be that the guy's a engineer or a plumber throughout the week. He trains 2 nights a week to then play on a Saturday, but he knows that if he plays on the Saturday, he's going to make maybe 40% from the game on the Saturday of what he would have made for the rest of the week with his day-to-day work. So the finances for those guys are actually quite significant. And it got to the point where some of those guys would come in and say to you, look, I've got this injury, but I can't let the head coach know about the injury because I have to play Saturday. Because if I don't play Saturday, I can't pay the bills at the end of the month. I need to play. And so you had completely different pressures to what you'd experience in the Premier League, especially where, the guys are getting paid the same regardless of injury status. So the reasons behind them having these different emotions are quite different. So I always felt like it's pressurized even back then. So even then, you never really switch off from it. And it's sometimes harder when it's a part-time role. You're sort of in your day-to-day job thinking I need to make sure I'm there on time tonight for this certain thing. I need to be here, there. And you're always thinking about what's coming next. And it is difficult. And it does become a big part of your life and you never really switch off. And I think, especially now everyone's got a mobile phone and it's so easy to text someone and the head coach might message you at 11 at night. Hi Phil, I don't want to disturb you with a phone call, but is such a person going to be fit for the weekend, or is he training tomorrow? And as soon as you see the message, like your brain starts thinking, okay, is he going to be fit? He's not going to be fit, and then already you're not relaxed anymore. So yeah, it just becomes part of your everyday mentality, which probably isn't the healthiest way to be. But I think you can manage it almost like I personally try and sort of section off my days a little bit. So for example, we've got 3 young kids. And I try and make sure that when I'm with them, I'm not thinking about other stuff. And I have to probably have the phone nearby, because if I miss a call and literally something's going on and I'm not across it, then it could be an issue. So I wouldn't say I ever sort of put the phone in the other room and don't have it, but I certainly try and not be using it when I'm with the kids and doing stuff. And then think, well, actually, when they go to bed early. So when they go to bed at 7, I'm going to then do 3 hours of work until 10. But then not letting what's going to happen between 7 and 10 affect what happens when I'm with the kids, and not be thinking about that. Try and just sort of think, focus on this. And then 7 o'clock, they're in bed. Okay, now it's work, and just trying to find ways of sectioning off your life a little bit. But it's not easy, and I think that's that's one of the big demands of the role. Really, I think the fact that your schedule is dictated by somebody else and can be affected by all sorts of different things, whether it's an injury or a result, and somebody is always dictating where you are and when, which, you know, is difficult, but I think it's the nature of working in an elite sport, really.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people have to deal with that today, but it sounds like you're pretty passionate about what you do and working in elite sport, and you've had an incredibly successful career so far. Do you have any advice for aspiring physiotherapists or sports scientists wanting to get into high performance sport? Because it's often really competitive, as you mentioned before, and it's a long, hard road to the top. But do you love what you do, and what's your advice to some of those younger professionals?
Yeah, 100% love what I do, and I'd never see myself doing anything different, really. I think I've always been a keen sportsman, not the best sportsman, but a keen sportsman, and I've always wanted to work in sport. I think probably when I realised that I wasn't going to be a professional sportsman, the next best thing really is working closely with them, which is what I managed to do. So very passionate about it, and I think that then overrides those negative consequences. So when I said to you about, you know, you never really switch off, well, actually, it's fine because you really love what you're doing. Like, I don't feel like I've done a day's work for the last 15 years because I've really enjoyed doing what I'm doing. It's not like going to work. It's just like, it's just you enjoy doing it, which is, you know, it's great. And I'm very fortunate to have that, you know, that attitude towards work. And I know a lot of people, you know, don't have that. So I'm fortunate to have that. In terms of getting into sport, and that is a really difficult thing, I think for me, the most important thing when I look at CVs now, I look at what they've done to get themselves into that position, to be applying for that job, or to show that they're ready for that job. So if someone sends me a CV and literally they have worked in a clinic, and then they've thought, well, actually I don't like being in a clinic anymore, I'm going to apply for a job in a football team, what have they actually done to prepare themselves for that? And if it's nothing, then they're not going to get an interview. But if they've been working in a clinic and at the same time as doing that, and I'm referring to what I did as well, because I think honestly that was a really effective way of getting in. You just got to put yourself out there and get as many different experiences as you can. And that might not always be paid work. It might be volunteer, and it might be doing some shadowing with another professional. But just sort of getting yourself in different environments is going to give you the experience that you're going to need to get yourself in the door and to keep yourself in there once you get in. But it's also going to open up a lot of doors from contacts that you make as well. If you're working at 4 or 5 different places and meeting 3 or 4 different professionals in each different place, and you're making 15 different contacts there that you wouldn't have otherwise made. And then if somebody says to them, oh, we've got a junior physio job coming up at our club, do you know anybody? Then straight away, if you've shown some application and you've shown some ability and knowledge, then they might say, oh, I've got this guy or this girl who's working for us here, they might be a good fit for you. And that's what happened with me. I through putting myself in those positions, eventually the way I got my job at Wolves was quite funny. I worked in the NHS, so the National Health Service, with a lady who was married to a guy who was the head physio at a team called Preston at that time. And I just said, I'm really keen to get into sport. I'm doing this part-time job. Would you mind giving your husband my CV to have a look at and give me some feedback on? So I didn't want to sort of say, have a look at and see if give me a job. I thought if he feels like he's kind of helping me a little bit, he might engage me a bit more. And fair play to me, rang me and said, look, yeah, I like your CV. I think you should do this, this and this. And then another 2 months later, he rang me and said, look, we've got a job at Preston. Do you want to come for an interview with us? So I went for an interview with him. Didn't get the job. And he said, look, you didn't have the right experience we're after, but thanks for coming through. You came across well, but we're probably a bit too junior. But I'll keep you in mind if anything else comes up. And then he moved to Wolves and then rang me a year or so later and look, we got the job at Wolves. And I remember you from Preston last year, the interview. Would you like to come and speak to us? So the way I got my job at Wolves was through handing my CV to a lady who I worked with in respiratory care at a hospital. So yeah, I think you just got to be a bit opportunistic, but just sort of put yourself out there. And give yourself those experiences, and I think I might be sounding old, but I do feel like that's becoming less and less common. And I do feel like the younger generation coming through university a lot of the time feel like they should be getting this good job straight away, should be getting paid a certain salary straight away. And I might be wrong about that, and I apologise if I've upset any of your listeners or viewers there, but I really do feel like, you know, no one's got a right to get a good job. You've got to put yourself out there and you've got to graft, you've got to show that you've got the ability to, you know, do those unpleasant things, get up first thing in the morning to go and do something, or do all the rubbish jobs. Like you might be in an environment in a sports team and the head physio or the head of sports science is saying to you, you know, your job now is going to clean the gym for an hour or to wash down all the beds at the end of the day. And I think if you do that with a smile on your face and they're enthusiastic about doing it, people remember that. Whereas if you say, oh, it's a waste of my time, I'm here watching, but I'm not getting any experience. All I'm doing is cleaning beds. Well, you know, people recognise that. So I think you've got to sort of embrace the opportunity and get out of it what you can, is my message, I think.
That's such a great story, and I think a lot of the listeners will be able to relate to that, especially if they've got aspirations for being in elite sport. We've also got quite a few listeners that come from many other different sporting teams and codes listening in. A lot of them are grassroots teams with small budgets. What's your kind of best piece of advice? A lot of what you've been talking about has been kind of technology, a lot of time with your load monitoring, that GPS, that kind of thing. What's your best advice for grassroots sporting clubs or individual athletes to get the best out of their performance? A few little things, whether that's recovery or training or learning. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it depends a little bit on what level that's at. And if we're talking about really, low level amateur stuff where maybe they're just training once or twice a week and then playing on a Saturday, then you're going to be a bit limited in what you can do compared to maybe a lower league setup who are still training 4 or 5 times a week, but just operating at a lower level at that time. So I think there are a lot of things that you can do that don't cost any money and don't really need any equipment. So, for example, if you've got the players in every single day, but you've got no money, well, what's to stop you doing some kind of really simple wellness assessment on those guys? So give them a questionnaire. You can do some on Google Forms or whatever, and just send them a questionnaire out by the phone, which then comes back in for you to look at the results of, to get an idea about how they're sleeping, what the diet's been like, what the mood's like. So those kind of really simple things can be effective because it might be you pick up something from that. Which then affects how you allow that guy or girl to train on that given day. So I think simple things like that are free of charge, don't cost anything. I think in terms of things like strength and conditioning, same again, you don't need a load of equipment to be able to do some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So for example, some of the functional movement stuff, there's so many videos on YouTube just using things like bungees and bands and other things which cost $30. I mean, it's not going to break the bank to buy a load of bungees that you can then attach to a wall and then get them to do some functional movements away from a bungee, for example. Or you can do partnered stuff. So for example, what's to stop you? Obviously things like Nordics and other things that you need to partner up for, but then perhaps some reactive work, so working one-to-one and trying to mirror somebody else. It's so simple, but it's actually really effective, and just really simple things that don't need any technology. And you can spend $20,000 on a light wall with lots of different lights and it's touch the lights, but then that's probably no different than standing opposite me and copying what I do. So I think there's certainly ways of doing different things to achieve the result you're after without breaking the bank. In terms of load monitoring, I think that's perhaps a little bit more difficult. And I'd say the best way about that would be to get the subjective feedback off the players in terms of how they feel. So just simple things like RPE to sort of see how they felt the session went. Heart rate monitoring is fairly inexpensive these days. I think you could potentially fit some team up with a set of team heart rate monitors, which might give you some input, sort of information in terms of internal load, which could be useful if you've got the budget for that. Or then lastly, speaking to the coaching staff and sitting down at the end of the session or the end of the week with the coach and his assistants or her assistants and saying, this is what I thought of these players. He looked like he's a bit fatigued to me. What did you think? How did you see the game? And actually trying to have a conversation about that. And then perhaps if you have done some of the other things like subjective monitoring or some simple strength testing, you might be able to say, well, actually, yeah, what we're seeing on the pitch stacks up with his lack of sleep last week, or some of the work we did in the gym he wasn't been able to do as well as he normally would do. So maybe he's got a little bit of accumulated fatigue that we need to address. So I think there are ways around it. It's just a case of sort of thinking outside the box and not being frustrated by the limitations, but actually thinking about the opportunities and what can you do, what you got, as opposed to what can't you do because of what you've not got.
I've got a couple more questions for you, Phil, and this one has come in. What types of sports tech do you use in your programs, and did data analysis contribute towards program design structure?
Yeah, so in terms of technology, obviously the most obvious one in terms of load monitoring would be GPS. So personally, the last 7 or 8 years I've been using Stat Sports, although last year at Galaxy, to be fair, we used Catapult, to be fair, with the first team actually. So yeah, so mixture of Catapult and Stat Sports, but I'm more au fait with Stat Sports. But to be honest, I think they both work really well, and I don't think there's any reason why you'd use one or the other. To be honest, I'm sure the manufacturers disagree, but I think they both, although they're giving slightly different outputs in terms of how they use the terminology, they're all giving the same information. So GPS would be one thing. And then in terms of gym equipment, I've been using a lot of iso inertial equipment from a company based in Portugal, which gives some instant biofeedback as well. So, for example, it's got a sensor on the top of the equipment. So when you're using, for example, a wall-mounted pulley system, as well as giving the resistance through the flywheel, it also has a force meter on there, so you can actually see the amount of force being generated. You can get some real-time biofeedback on that as well, which is useful. So you can use the player, and if he's looking at the graph and saying, okay, we need to get above that line, we need to get above that line, actually using that to push him within the session. But then also that's been really useful because it means that you're recording everything from every session as well. So it takes away the need to ever do any sort of in-season fitness testing, because in the past we might have done once every 6 weeks a set of 5 or 6 different tests to sort of monitor strength or fitness levels over the course of the season, whereas now we're getting that data every single session and are able to sort of monitor real time any changes in power outputs throughout the season. So that's been useful for us. And then in terms of things like wellness and sleep monitoring and kind of athlete management systems, I've been using Kitman Labs more recently at LA Galaxy, which is a athlete management system which has a really nice athlete interface which they can download on the phone, where they can answer any subjective questions that you've got for them, and they upload that, and it's cloud-based system, so straight away you can see that back in the office or on your mobile device to sort of see what the responses are as they come into that.
Are they pretty good at doing that consistently?
Yeah, they are. I think, yeah, as has been a theme, I think that comes down to education and communication as well. And if they just feel like they're doing that because the club want them to do it, but actually nothing's happening with the information, then they won't buy into it, they won't do it. And then you'll see, and I've had it before at clubs where literally they know nothing's really happening with the information. So, they'll just put 5 every single day, or they might put a random 10 in and see if anyone notices and comes and asks them about it. The guys are pretty cute, and they'll try and test the system a bit. So I think the important thing for me is to make sure that the players understand the reasons behind the questions you're asking, and also what's being done with that information. So if they say they've got a sore hamstring but nobody speaks to them, that's very different than from them putting that information on their questionnaire. And then as soon as they come in the door in the morning, there's a physio or sports scientist or therapist there saying to them, okay, we looked at your wellness, you said your hamstring sore, come through when you've got your kit on, let's have a look at you. And I feel like, they feel like they're being cared for then. So I think, buy-in's good if you explain the reasons for doing it and they see the impact of it. I think buy-in's terrible if they think it's a waste of time.
This has been so fascinating, Phil, and I feel like I could sit and talk to you and ask you questions all day. But I've just got a few quick questions, a few fun questions to finish up with. And
fine.
One or a couple of word answers would be great. Who's the best football player you've ever looked after?
I would say Raul Jimenez, which will really upset Javier Hernandez, because they're both two prominent strikers for the Mexican national team. But when I saw them, I'd say Chicharito was coming towards the end of his career, whereas Raul was at the peak. So I'm going to sit on the fence a bit and say I'm sure they're both excellent, but I think in how I saw him, Raul was the better of the two. Great.
What team did you go for growing up?
You won't have heard of them, but it was a small team called Oldham Athletic, a really small team around North Manchester. But at the time, when I was growing up, they were yards down the road from where we lived at the time. We're in the Premier League, which is unbelievable. Now they're back probably where they belong historically, which is in the 4th tier. But at the time, they were my team.
Your favourite sport to watch away from football? If you have time.
Probably golf, actually. I really enjoy playing and watching golf.
Nice. Your favourite World Cup or sporting moment?
I like track and field as well. And I always remember Michael Johnson breaking the 200-meter world record in 1996 in Atlanta. I think that was an unbelievable moment, and the amount by which he broke the record was astonishing at the time. So that's one that really stands in my memory.
Nice. The worst faked injury you've ever seen?
That I personally seen. I saw a nasty head injury. Got over to the guy. He was unconscious on the floor. I was holding onto his head. The doctor came on, and we started to sort of to go through the process of dealing with the head injury. The guy who had elbowed him got sent off, and he opened his eyes, said, "Has he been sent off?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, brilliant." And Good, and he was absolutely fine. I won't name the guy. I won't name him.
Maybe don't do that one. Most common injury in football, or that you deal with?
You probably, whether it's an injury or not, but certainly kind of adductor overload, irritation. You see a lot of sort of niggly groins, which don't always need to be taken out of training. We can be managing them in season, but I think you see a lot of adductor-related pathology.
And if you could live anywhere in Australia, would it be the Gold Coast?
100%.
Great. The city of Gold Coast, they will absolutely love that. So,
no, I've never been to Australia. I need to try and schedule a trip. I've never actually been to Australia.
Well, hopefully we will be able to do a lot more international travel soon.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Start to clear up. So thank you so much for joining us. I have so many more questions I would love to ask you, but you've been so generous.
We'll have to do part 2 at some point.
There we go, part 2. And good luck for what is next to come. And thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you very much for having me. That's great. Thanks, Harriet.